Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our webcast presented by Trust Me. My name is Ryan Narayan. I'm an editor at large here at Security Week, covering a lot of the issues we'll be discussing here in this webcast. So I myself am looking forward to this presentation and fireside chat. Sorry for the late start. We have been having connectivity issues, so I'll apologize on behalf of Mahmoud, who is struggling to connect a little bit. So we'll just go on with the webinar. Rachel, thank you for popping on and helping us with this. Can you introduce yourself for the audience, give the folks a sense of what you do and what your company does?
Of course. Yes. Thank you, Ryan. So my name is Rachel Toback. I am an ethical hacker and the CEO of Social Proof Security. We are a social engineering prevention company. And we do this by helping people with training and penetration testing. So actually hacking individuals and organizations. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, one of the cool things, I've seen you appear on CNN, at Black Hat, and at DEF CON and so on, doing a lot of these demos. And I want to just kind of prime the audience that we'll have a live attack simulation presented by Rachel here at the end of this fireside chat. So stand by and look forward to that. We'll also be taking questions from the audience. So there is a Q&A box in this webinar platform. Post your questions for Rachel at the end of the fireside chat and at the end of the attack simulation. We'll get to your questions. So let's jump right into it. Rachel, you ready?
I'm ready.
The first question is, what are the most common social engineering techniques that attackers use to exploit finance employees and executives? Are they a very, very specific target we're starting to see now?
Yeah, absolutely. Super specific. So let's break it out into two categories because our finance employees and our executives are a little bit different. So for our finance employees, we're really likely to go after those folks with things like fake invoice emails, wire transfer requests, and these come in through email or phone call, gift card requests, text messages, or calls as well. And then, of course, we have the common request to change banking details for employees that come in through chat, email, and phone call. And then for executives, oh yeah, go on.
No, sorry. Sorry to interrupt. This is like normal part of people's work. This is,
right.
You're targeting the things that they're supposed to be doing.
That's exactly right. So when we're attacking, we specifically try to attack the role, the person within their role in context. So we wouldn't send the same messages to finance as we would to executives, as we would to somebody in design, for instance. So for executives, the attacks are a little different. We're going to be pretending to be, say, another executive or a board member to those executives. And we might request something like a sensitive document, a password, a code. We really want the level of access to planning documents that executives have. So they've got access to proprietary info, M&A planning documentation. And oddly enough, attackers are more likely to actually pretend to be you as an executive to your team than they are to try and attack you directly. Because executives can be pretty discerning. But if we can pretend to be an executive to the team and ask for wire transfers, documents, and passwords, we're more likely to get it because you have that sense of authority over the team.
And we see that coming where a phishing message will appear. It's coming from your CEO. Can you provide a little bit of an example of exactly what that would look like to an executive to executive communication?
Yeah, so executive to executive will often pretend to be somebody who's preparing for a board meeting or some really kind of like high profile meeting that everybody knows is going to happen. Now, the interesting thing about board meetings is they're often quite public. So people will talk about them, preparing for them on social media. You'll see people flying in for board meetings and they have that on their Instagram. So you kind of know when it's going to happen and you can intercept the trust that has been built throughout that team at just the right moment to make it believable.
All right, let's pivot to our next question here is, how is the rise of generative AI and, a lot of the ChatGPT type tools that are available making these attacks? Is it making it more sophisticated and convincing? Are we easier to spot it? Like, how do you see the use and the easy availability of these tools adding to the arsenal for someone like you if you're doing a test?
Yes, so I use deepfakes a lot in my attacks now, so I can kind of break down exactly how I do it. So first, we've got tools like your ChatGPT. These kind of allow us to come up with really good pretext ideas, which is who we're pretending to be. You can ask a chatbot, okay, I'm trying to target somebody in this role to, sell them something. And obviously the chatbot doesn't know that you're trying to write a phishing email, text message, or phone call script, right? So it'll kind of pump out like a really good idea for a phishing email, a text message, a call script. And we can even kind of power phone calls with an AI powered agent now. So that's like a full voice clone talking on a phone. It sounds like you're talking to a real person. Then we've got AI voice clones. So separate from the AI chatbot, this allows us to clone anybody's voice within a few seconds, and we can spoof the caller ID, make it look like it's really calling from, say, an executive to an executive or an executive to a team member, and then ask for something like a wire transfer or for a document. And then we can also kind of couple that together with AI tools for deepfakes. We can actually deepfake you using your LinkedIn profile picture to create a believable version of you in a live Zoom or Teams call. And I'm actually going to demo this a little bit later with William in this event.
Hi, Mahmoud. We just had Mahmoud join the webinar. While he gets set up, we'll just... Can you hear us now?
Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Can you hear us?
Okay. Gotcha. I apologize. I am dialing in from my phone here. So if you're not getting clear voice from me, I apologize. I also apologize for the camera. Just been a hectic, I would say, technical difficulty just because I'm traveling. I'm not in my home office or in my work office. I'm just traveling, and I'm literally sitting in a hotel room doing this. So apologies for this.
No worries.
So I missed the beginning part of this, but I clearly understand in terms of where we're going with the topic itself. Look, to me, when it comes to the rise of generative AI and how these attacks have become more sophisticated and convincing, I look at social engineering's attack, sometimes a topic that's very crucial, but yet often underestimated from a cybersecurity lens perspective. It's a topic that I believe it strikes at the heart of what we do day in, day out from a digital perspective. But not only is it touching, or targeting systems and technical vulnerabilities, but it really targets people, which is what makes it, in my opinion, the attacks particularly more dangerous and challenging to sort of kind of defend against. And we can see this from a lot of different stats. If you read up most of the breaches, there's a recent breach investigation report done by Verizon that says 74% of these breaches involve some level of human element, as what we're seeing in the industry. So again, these attacks tend to target people, and more specifically to target executives and financial professionals, because we know oddly that's because of the fact that they're directly dealing with access to money. So as a result, dealing with these type of attacks leads to, in my opinion, thousands and millions of dollars that are lost in the industry, speaking purely from a corporation perspective. So to me, the rise of these attacks have definitely made it more a sense, resolution from a sophistication perspective, because it's no longer just dealing with phishing, but it's actually dealing with an element of complexity and sophistication as it relates to social engineering itself. So it's a real threat, and I think these attacks are just what we're seeing in the industry has just gotten really, really sophisticated with what we're seeing lately.
And Rachel, we covered this at the top of the show, but I would just give Mahmoud a chance to jump in, and you guys can have a detailed conversation about this. But specifically, why do you think finance professionals and these executives are particularly susceptible? We know why they go after them. You go after where the target and the data is. But why are they so susceptible? Are we not training our executives better? Is it just impossible to discern what is fake and what isn't? Help me understand why they're so susceptible.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone is susceptible to social engineering attacks, but folks in finance and executives in particular have a lot more to lose. So we hear about it more. I can trick anybody, right? With the right timing, the right pretext, anyone can be tricked. But if I trick somebody, say in design, into clicking on a link and providing me access, password, admin access, I'm going to gain access to their Figma prototypes. That's just not as interesting to me as an attacker than if I go after somebody in finance, where I can move millions of dollars into my bank account before I'm caught. I can steal sensitive info and affect a stock price. I can manipulate internal and customer accounts. And if I trick an executive, I get access to important planning information. I have details that I need to make trading decisions. I have the keys to the kingdom to trick team members into wire transfers, all because they report to me, right? So it's not that finance and executive folks are particularly more susceptible to social engineering. It's that all human beings are susceptible to social engineering because they play off the principles of persuasion that are innate in all of us, like urgency, fear, reciprocity, and more. So it's everybody can be tricked. It just matters a lot more when you have the keys to the kingdom and millions of dollars at your disposal in your job.
Mahmoud, as a CISO, and when you're managing this risk within your organization, and you listen to Rachel say, not only are attackers very, very skilled, and AI and deepfakes is adding a new element of seriousness to it. She's saying that, your professionals and your executives are more susceptible to risk. Are you as a CISO segmenting those users into a separate way and dealing with them separately as a response to this business email compromise risk? Like how are you mitigating what she's talking about?
Yeah, I think one of the aspect of, and I completely agree with Rachel on this point, that look, it's not because just simply that they're dealing with money that makes them a prone. It's just it's the idea being that they are these type of attacks are targeting people in general. But one aspect with this too, as you talk about it, the way we're sort of kind of dealing with mitigating some of this is predominantly around the aspect of better training. I think that's one of the reasons why we see the target being specific to the financial professionals, because they may not always receive the adequate training on recognizing and preventing these type of social engineering attack. And so one way we're sort of kind of addressing this particular point is just creating more opportunities, lessons for them to learn on how to recognize beyond phishing what type what something like this may look like, where someone is actively trying to target them with things like, okay, you look at patterns on an email when if someone's asking you for something that looks outside of the norm, just double check and validate that with the company by simply picking up the phone and calling and saying, hey, look, is this email really coming from you? To things like if when we heard the common attack with the chief finance officer that got tricked into a meeting with the person that was social engineering to an AI, it's things like just validate if someone's making a request in a team itself. Afterwards, just give them a call and see how they're doing and whether or not if the amount looks right that you're supposed to be processing. So it's really around better education awareness that we're sort of targeting in trying to help us mitigate against these social engineering attacks.
Rachel, I want to ask a little bit of a controversial question,
Sure.
Especially around this user education bit, because as organizations, I'm writing about this stuff for 10, 15 years. We've spent so much on user education. We've had all these user education programs. Everyone joins an organization. Every 6 months, you have to click these videos and watch all these videos as part of your training. It's embedded in our lives,
Right.
But it hasn't changed much. People still click on stuff because people have to click on stuff. Do you have a thought on how do we actually fix this? Is it meant to be fixed through technical controls, or are we relying on people to know when to click and when not to click? Like, what's your thought on?
Yeah, I like this question. This is a hot take. So I think that there is no way that it could be just one thing or the other. For instance, it can't be just user education without technical controls. And it can't be technical controls without user education, because the technical controls can be circumvented, right? You can have all the technical controls in the world, and if I can still convince you to give me your password and give me your multi-factor authentication code, then I can trick you essentially into giving me all the information that I need. So we need people to be able to spot and shut down specific attacks. They need to be able to understand what those look like, particularly to their role as a finance individual, as an executive, as a CISO. and they need to understand it in context of their job. So if their job requires them to click, move money around and download, we can't tell them not to do those things. That's literally what they get paid to do. But instead, we have to educate them on in a role-based way about what the likely scams and scenarios are on a quarter by quarter basis, because it changes frequently. AI changes the way that we do these things. And we need the technical controls. We need the password manager. We need the technical controls for wire transfers. We need the Be Politely Paranoid protocol to verify people are who they say they are. You know, you need the right MFA for your threat model. So there's a lot of things we got to get right. And sometimes folks forget that it's both sides of the coin, not just one.
And on that same vein, what are the key warning signs employees and executives actually should be looking out for to recognize these potential social engineering attacks? Is there an easy tell? Because your job is to make sure there is no tell. Like, how am I supposed? What is the tell that I should look for?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So part of the issue is that AI changes at such a rapid pace. So what I tell you right now is really only relevant for the next probably 5 to 6 months, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway in case it stops even one attack. So if you want to recognize a social engineering phone call that's using an AI voice clone, I recommend you interrupt it. Now, why do I say that? Because there's usually between 500 to 800 milliseconds of latency. So if you notice these really specific, consistent pauses in a voice clone, it's probably an AI voice clone. If you want to spot an AI deepfake, so like a live Zoom or Teams call, I recommend looking at the blinking. Oftentimes, the deepfakes that we create, the blinking actually happens in slow motion or reverse. So it's very bizarre looking. And then if you ask the person to put their hand in front of their face, or if you see them pick up a coffee cup and take a sip, and that digital mask kind of looks blurry when they put the hand in front or the cup in front, that's a pretty telltale sign that you're looking at a digital mask or a deepfake. So people catch me all the time. I mean, there's pretty obvious warning signs. It's just that a lot of times I try to avoid putting my hand in front of my face, right?
Here's a question though, right? What should trigger my paranoia to start looking for that? Like, I feel like if I'm already being tricked into a deep fake call, right? I'm already there. What should trigger my paranoia to look for those pauses, to look for that flicker? Is there something there?
I would say if you're getting asked to do something that's sensitive with a request of urgency and fear, that's where we really need to take a step back and go, wait a minute, this sounds like a social engineering scam. It's got the hallmarks of it. And then from there, be like, is there like really long pauses? Is there a strange blurriness? Is the blinking strange? And if you can kind of verify that that person is who they say they are, maybe you chat them, you call them, you say, hey, I'm actually jumping into a meeting. Let me give you a call back. And you like initiate it back to the person that you trust and know. That's a really good way to get in the middle and interrupt the attack in motion.
Mahmoud, do you have a thought here on how you tell your folks to be able to recognize these tells and these potential social engineering attacks?
Yeah, I pretty much echo what Rachel was saying there. The only thing I would add is, I would watch out for any generic language that you see. If you see general comments being made, something that you would say that's not very specific, other than the ask. I think you'd watch out for that and the tone that it's coming across with. I also would say that in the corporation world, some of us have now started to use, depending on the type of the position that you're in, codes that would ultimately result in someone validating on the other side. So in other words, it would be an agreement between the chief financial officer and the CEO that has to approve something that, if a request is made, whether it's through an email, whether it's done through even on a Teams call, then there is a after the fact, a code word that appears that basically is that the individual would say when they're making the request, and or if they didn't see it. So let's say if I'm approving the request and the approval came to me, I would just basically call back and ask for the code just to double confirm that is there. So that's just the one additional enhancement that we made to our program, and it's not for everything, but it is for like these larger sum of payments that require anything that requires a CEO's approval or CFO's approval.
And Rachel, I'm glad you mentioned this advice only stands for 4 to 5 months, because you expect the tools will be better. And as these things evolve and the tools get better and better, it will be a lot more difficult to spot. And I imagine in your world, you're projecting 2 years out, this stuff is going to become almost unrecognizable. What happens then?
Yeah, well, maybe in 2 years we can get back on this phone call and I can tell you exactly how to spot it, or maybe I'm going to tell you all hope is lost. But I'm a persistent optimist, so I think there's always going to be telltale signs, and I think we're always going to be doing whack-a-mole, offensively and defensively, where the technology changes and we find signatures and artifacts that we can use to catch it in the act, and then the technology evolves past those and we find new signatures and artifacts. So I think we're going to find different cryptographic signatures that are employed to verify authenticity. And I think those will become more and more important as the tools become so salient that we can't tell what's real and what's fake without really talking to the person in person and having a real conversation IRL.
Which segues right into my next questions. You know, we've seen organizations investing heavily in security technologies, and the human factor remains this critical weakness as we've been discussing here. Should organizations be relying on your browser, your Zoom, the tools that I'm using for everyday things? Should those technologies be blocking and stopping this for us natively? Why are we pushing the emphasis again on the enterprise and on the business to protect themselves?
Yeah, I think we always kind of see technology defenses slow to respond. We tend to be reactive in nature. And so offensively, we come up with something really cool and interesting. Defensively, it takes a while to get the approvals because criminals don't need approvals. They do whatever they want, right? Versus in defense, we have actual processes. We have protocols in place. We've got to verify that it actually works, that we don't have false positives. So it's harder sometimes to be a defender than it is to be an attacker. So I think we are going to see organizations roll out technological defenses. It just takes them longer than it does for attackers to innovate sometimes.
Mahmoud, when you think of this within your security program, are you viewing protection against deepfakes and business email compromise within the context of what's already there, or are you adding to your defensive stack to defend against this particular AI-powered social engineering, deepfakes, business email compromise, all being mashed together?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, at least as of today, there's only so much that technology can do because of there is the element of the human factor involved in here. And quite honestly, humans, in my opinion, they have this inherent trust built in depending on who they're talking to, especially if it's their boss or if it happens to be somebody in the C-suite. The trust is automatically built in because you're making the assumption that request is coming from that specific individual, right? So it's from that perspective that I think, in my personal opinion, the human factor plays a strong role here, and by default, we're naturally inclined to trust our trust seniority here. And so I think that's part of the reason why we often tend to see this. And then just, in my opinion, you have this cognitive bias automatically where it can cloud your judgment, in my personal opinion, and making those individual decisions, more vulnerable or you're easy to get manipulated. So to me, that's a big element that plays here. And as long as the human factor is involved in between to make these decisions, you're always going to have some level of prone to risk for some of these things that come in, because the bad guys are always going to try to figure out how to manipulate that in some form or fashion.
Yeah, and when it comes to finance, there's human vulnerabilities that are baked into a standard finance interaction, right? So think about when you make changes related to your finances. You, as a person, talk to your HR director, talk to your head of finance to make a direct deposit change, to update your address when you move. Those are human-to-human interactions. You, as a person, call your bank to initiate a wire transfer, and you talk to another person to process it. And so any job that heavily leverages trusted interactions with a high degree of interpersonal relationship, there's a social engineering risk that's inherent within that role, because we trick people to steal money and data. Sometimes we try to trick software, and oftentimes we try to hack it, but it's a lot easier for us to just ask the right questions than it is to build the malware to get on your machine, right? So that's why we see that the majority of attacks start with social engineering, because it's easier. You don't need to spend as much technical work if you can just get the password, log in.
Rachel, how much live in the wild deepfake attacks you think is actually happening that is going unreported? Do you think this is widespread? Do you think we're in the early stages where they're experimenting with it? What is the level of what's actually happening in the wild, you think?
I think it's in the early stages. So I try to listen to the chatter that's going on Telegram and different hacker forums. And from what we hear, in general, the most common AI-based attacks right now are using AI chatbots or LLMs to write phishing material. So that's really common. Then as we go up to voice clones, those are also common with attempts to trick people, particularly acting as an executive, asking for a wire transfer or gift cards to somebody who's not in the C-suite. So that's really common, but that's not a full deepfake, right? Like a video deepfake. That we only have a few instances where we hear of it being successful. We definitely hear of people trying this, and it works better in like romance scams, like interpersonal at-home stuff, as opposed to working super well right now in live Teams and Zoom calls in the office. We're just seeing that we're at the beginning stages of these deepfakes being popular, and over time, they will get more and more popular.
Sorry, go ahead.
If I can just add, I completely agree with Rachel. What we're seeing in our environment is predominantly large volume of phishing attacks that are taking advantage. That we clearly see that these are leveraging some level of Gen AI, because they're becoming really sophisticated and very clean. You can't really tell that they're truly phishing from that perspective. So the common phishing red flags are not very apparent on these things. Like the things that we would see with spelling mistake or grammar mistakes, and so they were very well formatted. So we've seen a rise, at least on our side. This just from that perspective, the tactic of using phishing very commonly in the corporate environment.
And we are talking here about business email compromise, which suggests cybercrime activity. But do you guys know if there's any element of these techniques and tactics bleeding into nation state cyber espionage type attacks that, organizations, we have folks listening to this webinar, I'm sure, protecting assets at places that are targets for nation state attackers. Are we starting to see those folks adopt and embrace Gen AI, deepfake? Rachel, anything there?
Yeah, we definitely are. KnowBe4, that big security awareness training company, put a blog post out, I think in July of this year.
The North Korean thing.
The North Korean attackers, that's right. You know exactly what I'm talking about. So they used AI tools to basically pretend to be this individual. And I think they just took a picture from, say, LinkedIn or something, adopted that whole identity, and were actually able to gain access to a laptop from KnowBe4, and they started uploading malware really quickly, which was their downfall because they got caught. But, we're going to get smarter nation state actors over time who are going to be able to pretend to be another person within a live interview setting. We're definitely going to see this evolve, but we are starting to see AI being used in these types of interview style attacks right now.
And the last question before we get to our simulation and our deepfake demo is, a big picture question. And you guys can leave some thoughts with the audience here. And what kind of strategies should, security leaders be implementing to stay ahead of these risks and ensure your teams are protected? I'll start with you, Mahmoud. Like, what is your utter priority right now heading into your next board meeting when the board of directors say, hey, what are we doing about this AI deepfake thing I see on CNBC? Like, what is the top priority thing for you?
Yeah, I think some of it we touched on already. The first aspect of it is just better education awareness on these things. Rachel talked about it a little bit earlier. I touched on it as well. I think that's number one, just making sure we're doing that across the board in the enterprise, but also very specific for those that are actually focused on dealing with day in, day out finance related requests for the organization. The other one is, you heard me talk about it earlier as well, just making sure that there's some kind of code that is there specific when it comes to senior executive leaders And so that's another way that we're sort of kind of getting ahead of this, just to make sure that when it comes to these large scale, I would say higher amounts that need to be approved from a financial perspective, or a decision that needs to be made from an overall organization perspective at the C-suite level, then there's some level of coding that goes into play. The other aspect of this is, in my opinion, we're looking at one extra layer with multi-factor authentication in some of these systems that allow for the approval to go through. I know that the social engineering aspect doesn't necessarily, if you're already social engineering into it, you can potentially bypass that too. But again, that's one additional layer that can help from that perspective. Obviously, investing in tools such as Trust Me, just to put that additional technology element in front of it to make sure that, there's some cleaning that's happening before the email actually arrives, with some of the threat intelligence that's built into tools that you can overlay on top of your emails, especially because, as I said, 64% of the attacks that we see come through phishing. And if we can clean that up ahead of time with tooling that we can put in front of that, that's based on good threat intel, that's based on AI-powered defense, I think that helps. That goes a long way. And then the one additional thing that we're doing in our environment is really just what we call social engineering simulations. And so our internal pen testing vet team, it's tries to, on an occasion basis, simulate social engineering attacks against our own staff internally, just to make sure that we can help not only educate our employees, but also try to find any weak spots and find opportunities for additional education. So those are some of the tactics that we're applying to stay a little bit more vigilant and proactive in this space.
And Rachel, for you, do we have enough tools available to help us stop this? Let me rephrase the question. Are people becoming victims because they're not implementing MFA properly, they're not adding these technical controls, or they're just sitting ducks? Help me understand if we have enough available technical controls and software and Trust Me and all these little vendors that sit in between there. Do we have enough, or are we missing, or is there a big gap that still needs to be solved?
I think the issue is that we need both sides of that coin that we were talking about. So we've got to get it all right on the human side and on the technical implementation side. So on the human side, we've got to get the education such that it's role-based, it's quarterly, it's updated to what are the latest scams that I need to know right now. What about for my role? What about for my team's role if I am a leader at the organization? How do I be politely paranoid? How do I use two methods of communication to confirm people are who they say they are? And how do I bake that in to my everyday interactions at work so that my team doesn't feel uncomfortable saying 100%, I can get that wire transfer done for you. I just need to verify you are who you say you are, either with that code like Mahmoud was talking about, or a second method of communication or a technical tool. And then on the technical implementation side, we've got to get it all right. We've got to use long, random, unique passwords for each account. We've got to have the right multi-factor authentication for our threat model. And we've got to use technical tools to verify identity within finance flows to limit the human risk. So we've got to get the human stuff right, and we've got to get the technical stuff right. And a lot of times people choose one or the other to invest in, and that's a mistake.
And this stuff helps across the board. You're not just investing in this for BEC, right. Deepfake compromise. Like good MFA works everywhere for everything. So
right, exactly right. We've got to have everything set up, the human protocols and the technical tools.
All right. Well, let me get out of the way so you guys can do your simulated hack. I know the audience is waiting very much for this. In the meantime, just continue to put your questions. I see some questions starting to come in. Continue to put in your questions. At the end of the simulation, we'll get back and get some of your audience questions. So go ahead, Rachel.
All right. Can we bring William up to the stage here? William, are you ready to get hacked?
I am ready as I'll ever be.
All right. Here we go. So let's go through your live attack simulation here. To give you some context, everybody, William has given me consent to be able to go through and actually talk through how I would hack him. This is not how I did hack him. This is not how I will hack him. This is theoretical. So, William, you are not in danger. Everything is safe, okay? Do I have your consent to move forward here?
You do. Let's do it.
Alrighty. So let's start with your contact details. So what I do first is I go to LinkedIn and I click contact info. From there, I'm able to find your phone number, your email address, and your birthday. This makes it easy for me because I don't have to go to a data brokerage site like, say, Rocket Reach, Contact Out. It's just right there on LinkedIn. So this is the information that oftentimes people are thinking like, well, I got to have it out there for business, right? Like I have to have people contact me for my job, but it makes it a little bit easy for me to be able to fish you because I know exactly what contact details you are likely to respond to. Just to be sure, I put it into Rocket Reach and I wanted to see like, are your contact details the same? And I found the same contact details there. Mm-hmm. I then take those contact details, like your email address and phone number, and I put it into Dehashed. Dehashed is a repository of all the passwords that are available about you online, all of the breaches that you've been in. So no fault of your own. You can't stop another company having a breach of your personal data. All we can do as consumers and users is make sure that we use long, random, unique passwords so that if there is a breach, they can't take the breach from, say, our pizza delivery site and plug it into our bank account and steal all our money, or our work account and be able to, enact wire transfers, right? So I put your details into Dehashed and I was able to find you in 12 different breaches, no fault of your own. And I found some plain text passwords, some physical addresses among hashes that I could use to hack you. How do you feel about that? Like when you see this MGM breach here, you're like, yikes.
And honestly, I feel like I get an email every week now that I'm part of a new breach, so it's not too surprising, but still a little scary.
Yeah, it's not shocking, right? Okay, so now on to a pretext. So who would I pretend to be when I am hacking you? So where you go to school is not a secret. You going to the University of Connecticut is not something that you should be keeping private, but it's helpful to understand how an attacker would leverage this information to be able to hack you, right? So I might pretend to be from the University of Connecticut Alumni Center. And I might say, hey, William, Allie from the alumni office, we're reaching out to successful grads like yourself for a keynote for our prospective upcoming student event. The honorarium is $6,000. If you're available and interested, please fill out your Google form here with talk title and availability. And this Google form would be a lookalike malicious site that steals your Gmail password and MFA code. How do you feel hearing this right now?
I mean, $6,000 is not nothing. I'm happy to sign up for that.
A lot of times it's people always think like a fish is going to have something scary, right? Fear-based, urgency-based. And yeah, oftentimes they do. Most of the times they do. But sometimes they use the carrot rather than the stick, right? Mm. So here's another pretext, and this one's a little silly. So I would probably pretend to be from HubSpot and email at 5 a.m. your time so that you receive an email right when you wake up on your phone. And it says, hey, William, your HubSpot certification has been suspended due to misuse. See attachments for details or to appeal. And I know this sounds a little ridiculous, and you're like, I don't know if I'd fall for that. But when people have just woken up and they see a negative email before they've had coffee, their eyes, you can barely even see straight at this point. You a lot of times do click, and this is something that I found to be successful. I have to time my pretext attacks correctly. So how do you feel seeing this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a morning person, so this would definitely be one that would work on me.
I'm not a morning person either. I feel you. Okay, now it is time for a voice clone. I took about a minute of your voice and I put it into my AI voice cloning tool. Now imagine I'm pretending to be you and I spoof your phone number. So I change the caller ID so it looks like I'm calling from you. And I ask your teammate for a wire transfer. I want to show you exactly what this sounds like. And I want you to get a sense of what it sounds like with no interaction from me. So this is just like the raw AI output. Here's what it sounds like.
Hey, sorry, we need a wire transfer of $10,000. Can you get that set up for me?
All right.
That sounds a lot like me.
Yeah, I think that sounded a lot like you. That's pretty creepy to me. But to me, it's a little robotic, right? Like the way that it asks the question, it's a little bit stale. It's a little bit robotic. It's a little bit like flat, and you have a little bit more inflection when you speak. So I gave it my voice so that it knows what cadence, tone, timbre, and pitch I'd like it to match. So this is me speaking into the AI tool so that it knows how I want you to sound in your voice. You'll hear my voice in a second here.
Hey, sorry, we need a wire transfer of $10,000. Can you get that set up for me?
Okay, so now let's hear your voice speaking with my overlay of how I want the tool to sound. I actually think it's okay. It sounds a little bit too much like my voice, in my opinion. Let's see what you think.
Hey, sorry, we need a wire transfer of $10,000. Can you get that set up for me?
So now that you're hearing that, can I hear you say that phrase? Because I want to get a sense. If you say, hey, sorry, can I get a wire transfer of $10,000? I just want to hear what you say, what you sound like.
Hey, sorry, can I get a wire transfer for $10,000?
I feel like it matched your timbre and tone and pitch a little bit better. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Now that you've heard this, how do you feel hearing your own voice clone before I show you an even creepier full deepfake?
I don't love it, that's for sure. It's definitely very creepy.
Me either. All right, well, it's about to get creepier because I'm going to wear your face like a digital mask. So prepare yourself because this is just about the creepiest thing I'll ever do. So taking just your LinkedIn profile picture, I load it into my tool and I can then wear your face like a digital mask. Now, when I play this, you're going to basically hear my computer take off because it requires so much computing power to do this live. So let's see what it sounds like and looks like. Just about the creepiest thing.
Yeah, that is creepy.
Thank you so much for being a good sport about this, William. I know this is not the most fun experience probably to go through, so I appreciate you being a good sport. Can we get a round of applause for William in the chat?
Yeah. That was really, really cool and also really creepy.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I know we have plenty of time for questions here, so I think we can welcome back Ryan if you'd like to, and we can ask some questions from the audience.
Check. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I'm back. We do have a bunch of questions coming in from the audience. Thank you very much for that demo. I see where you're saying that the tools are not quite there. There's still some physical tells. But as we imagine, again, the tools evolving and getting better and better. Mahmoud, I wanted to get your response to seeing that. Is that something that makes you super nervous that someone in HR, someone in finance is getting a voice call like that? Help me understand before we get to the questions, your quick response to the demo.
No, absolutely very scary. Great job, Rachel, on that. I mean, this is exactly the stuff that we worry about in our environment where someone getting a call like this that we can authenticate and one of our users falling prey to that or is a victim of something like this. So very, very scary stuff. And certainly, it's one that we need to watch out for very carefully in terms of how we move forward with in this particular space.
All right, let's jump right into the questions. We have a question here. Is the best practice to hang up on a call like that and call the person directly? Like, what is the immediate best practice for finance director gets a call or gets a video like that?
Yeah. If you get the sense that somebody isn't who they say they are, or even if they're just asking for something sensitive and you think that they are that person, I would always initiate a call back. Because if I am spoofing a phone number, like displaying the caller ID to be from your CFO when I'm not, they will receive that call back, not me. So all I can do is make it look like it's the CFO. I can't actually receive the calls back unless I initiate a full SIM swap, but that's a lot of work and I'm not going to do that for every attack, only for like once in a blue moon.
A quick question directly for you, Rachel. What is your social engineering success rate without AI and what is it with AI?
I don't always like to answer this question because I feel like it makes people kind of nihilistic. I would say for an untrained organization, 9 times out of 10, I can get in within the first couple of tries. For an organization who is more trained, who understands what to look for, they know what the role-based scenarios are to avoid, they have the right technical tools set up, I would say it's somewhere about like 2 out of 10 times that I'm successful. So it makes it really obnoxious for me when you get everything set up correctly, which is what you want, because I'm a very persistent attacker, specifically because I'm hired to attack that firm. A persistent attacker who's annoyed with your organization because they're not very successful the first 8 times is going to move on to another company. And that's what you want. I mean, unfortunately, it's going to just be not you and somebody else rather than stopping the crime altogether. But yeah, you don't want it to be you. You want it to be somebody else, unfortunately.
I got a question here. It's someone says, I work in a law firm and we handle a lot of wire transfers. Is there guidance I can provide to my clients to warn them against these kinds of phone calls? Again, it's the tell here. We talked about the visual tells or their auditory tells, and you know, what are some of the guidance I can pass on to some of my clients that we have to do wire transfers? It's part of how we do business.
Right. Yeah. I would set up what I call being politely paranoid protocols. If the whole job between you and another person is to initiate wire transfers, you've got to be able to do your job. You can't get stuck. So what do we have to do? Every time that person, that customer or the individual calls you and says, hey, we've got to send $1 million here or there, you say 100%, we're going to do the protocols now. I have texted you, chatted you, signal messaged you, whatever thing that you've set up as the second method of communication, that's what you initiate at that time. They then go into Signal Chat, Slack, email, whatever you've set up, and they say, approved. And now you know you've checked with another method of communication and you're ready to go. Because when I hack, I haven't popped everything at once. The phone call is the first thing that I try because I don't need any technical access to your tools to be able to do that phone call.
I know you mentioned this politely paranoid. Go ahead,
if I can just echo what Rachel has said, I mean, even as simple as, you know, some companies I'm starting to see they're doing this is they'll send you a code and they'll say, okay, with your registered phone number, I'm sending you a code. I need you to repeat that code back to me, you know, before we can proceed forward. And they're doing this even not just for you know, we talk about financial transactions a lot of time, but even for authenticating a user that might be calling in for a help desk call or a service desk call. You know, they may say, well, you know what, let me send you a code. I just want to make sure I can authenticate you to validate you are who you are, and then just repeat the code back to me when you get it. So I really like that approach. And if I can just add a piece to this, because Rachel, you brought up a very good simulation on this. You know, this reminds me of a story, something very similar to another simulation that you know, my red team performed on a user inside. So we talk about wire transfers, we talk about phishing emails, but oftentimes we've seen one of the other use cases on this is always around resetting of passwords to try to see if you can get into a company's network and so on and so forth. So my red team basically, you know, in the background called up a user and they ran a YouTube video of someone being in the car. So there's like very loud noise of air coming through in the background. And so when you call up the service desk and you say, hey, I'm in the middle of like literally driving and I need to log into my Teams and, you know, my password isn't working. I'm not sure what to do. I don't have time. I'm in like, I need to just get this thing going and get ready to go. And when you show it in this urgency and this rush and then there's background noise coming back in the background, they also had like a little kid crying oftentimes too. So like multiple things going on, like if you can just do me a favor, I just need to reset my password to get there and here's who I am and so on and so forth. They had enough information. They were able to circumvent the service desk person to actually give out certain information. Of course, it got stopped. At some point, the person realized that something didn't look right, and then they decided to check on this thing. But something like a code coming back is a perfect example, and that's basically what they asked. They basically said, okay, you know what, I'm going to send you a code really quick. I just need you to validate this before you go. And then they weren't able to repeat the code, and therefore they got caught in this. So I think having that, what I call MFA, whatever the MFA experience might be, goes a long way in trying to validate these type of situations.
Really does.
Is there such a thing as MFA fatigue? And with AI, does that add to it?
Yeah, MFA fatigue, we definitely see that pop up. Like in the Uber hack that happened in 2022, the attacker basically MFA bombed or sent hundreds of MFA requests to the service desk and customer support folks' phone over and over and over again at like 3 a.m. until they were like, fine, admit it's me, because you're just exhausted, you're trying to sleep. So yeah, MFA fatigue is definitely real. But I think asking for a code, MFA, human-based MFA, I think those are totally normal. And I think that might even feel new to people.
Are we seeing in the rounds that as well, where the CEO is saying, I lost my phone number? Are we starting to see, like, Rachel, let's say you get stuck there. You're not going to stop there, right? Like, as a simulated attacker, you want to say, hey, I'm sorry, I lost my phone in a taxi or something. Are we starting to see that cat and mouse continue?
Yeah, we definitely see that cat and mouse continue. But me, as a persistent attacker hired to hack a specific organization, I'm a little different than a criminal in the wild who might be like, ugh, this company's so annoying. They have too many protocols and technical tools. I'm just going to move on to another company. And that's definitely what we see, because attackers, they run their organization like a business. So they're not going to spend time doing something that's not working.
You just want to run away faster than the other guy, right?
Yeah.
Any quick reaction recommendations on looping in authorities, FBI, law enforcement, when you suspect this is happening live, or are you just resigned to reporting it after the fact? What is some best practices there?
Yeah, we definitely have folks report things to the FBI and local law enforcement. There's not a whole lot that they take action on in the moment, unfortunately, but sometimes it can help them kind of track a threat actor over time. So it doesn't hurt to report. It's just not going to change anything right in the moment for you.
Were you willing to say which software you used to perform the simulation? There's a lot of questions coming in asking.
I always get asked that. I'm not going to be sharing that at this time.
This is a good one. Are there some excellent deepfake examples available in the public that we can use to train our executives? How do we convince them that this is not science fiction, that it's here and real? Rachel, is there any public documentation folks can go and find to kind of build into their own internal programs?
Yeah, I have a bunch of free videos available on YouTube. If you search 60 Minutes Rachel Toback, you'll actually see me impersonate an executive to the executive's team member to steal sensitive PII. So I recommend training your team with that for free if you'd like.
And on the question of politely paranoid, is there documentation and data available there to help people understand what you mean by that?
Yeah, it's all over my Twitter or my LinkedIn. It's just my name, @Rachel Toback, and you'll see it. I talk about it like every single day.
Maybe this is a question for you, Mahmoud. Is someone asking, while tools like Microsoft Defender for Office 365 and Google Workplace Security help detect phishing attacks, and there are some embedded things there, are there other tools to identify deepfakes? And what are some of your CISO concerns around the limitations of these tools to be effective against what Rachel is warning against? Like help the folks understand what's available currently to just help filter this stuff out.
Yeah, I can't speak to the tooling aspect of it. Maybe Rachel has a little bit more better insight into that, because everything we tried weren't really, some of the initial one that came through weren't really getting the job done. So don't have a recommendation on the tooling front. I would stick to some of the practices that Rachel talked about earlier. She simulated that as well. Just making sure that you've got some means of being able to check the person who is on the other side of this. But as far as tooling is considered, outside of the fact that you can do a lot more better job on phishing side, which I think that has really, especially as it relates to business email compromise with tools such as Trust Me. As far as deepfakes are considered, Rachel, I'm going to have to lean on you. I have not seen anything out there that's good enough to recognize this.
Yeah, I've evaluated many of them. One that comes to mind for me is Reality Defender. Reality Defender has a tool that lays on top of Zoom and Teams and will tell you if the person that you're chatting with looks to be a deepfake based on some of the artifacts that they have within their technical operation. So I've tested it. It has worked previously. I don't think any tool is going to be 100% effective. So you always got to use your being politely paranoid protocols. But yeah, check out a bunch of different tools. There's a lot out there.
And the last question, Mahmoud, you mentioned your red team was starting to do some exercises around this. Can you talk a little bit about success rates there? Have they've been earning flags, or have your blue team been catching them? Help me understand, some real professionals.
I made mention of this a little bit, very similar to what Rachel did there as well. It's just basically simulating a social engineering tactic to see if you can convince your employee base or your staff base in general to give up information to get into the environment. So the example I gave earlier, which is just literally, doing multiple things, where when you call the service desk to reset your password or to give you a password, and trying to show that you're multitasking, doing multiple different things is an example of it. But certainly, in my opinion, you don't have to do this in isolation yourself. There are really good folks that have figured this out. I'm sure Rachel can speak to it very more closely, but there are professional companies that have figured this out that can come in and they can try to impersonate social engineering attacks in your environment and see if it works out. Obviously, you do need permission from C executives, so don't do this without telling anyone. That's the only one thing I would give a warning on.
And Rachel, I'll give you the last word. Closing thoughts?
Yeah, be politely paranoid. So think about your role. Ask yourself, who would somebody pretend to be to try to trick me? Who do I have to trust to get my job done? Those are the people that the attacker will pretend to be. So start thinking from a role-based perspective. Start thinking about how you can upgrade your technical tools and get that stuff set up so that you can stop attackers like me in the act.
Well, we did have one last thing come in. It says, not a question, but I want to thank Rachel and Mahmoud for great information and guidance. So with that, I say it myself on behalf of Security Week team and the folks that trust me. Thank you, Rachel, and thank you, Mahmoud, for coming and sharing your expertise with us. For more information on Trust Me, we have a QR code up there. Trust Me, a company that eliminates payment fraud and errors, protecting businesses 24/7. This webcast will be available on demand when we're done here, so check the links at Security Week. And with that, again, thank you, folks, for coming and sharing your expertise with us. And to the audience, thank you for listening. And we'll release you to go grab your lunches.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, folks.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.